For today's review, I'm going to be talking about the 1981 slasher classic, The Burning. Now, this is a well-loved movie. Definitely has its following, though I think it's fair to say that for at least some time, it was sort of half forgotten. Sort of lost in the shuffle, not really readily available. That is until there was a DVD release in 2007, which made it available to a brand new generation of fans, myself included. Since then, I think it has a Scream Factory release, if I'm not mistaken. So it's definitely built its reputation for being one of the definitive 80s slashers. It definitely has all the trademarks, everything you'd kind of want in one of those movies. Of course, everyone's going to cite influence from Friday the 13th, though. You know, the writer Bob Weinstein claims he thought of it before the Friday the 13th came out, and you know, he wrote it beforehand, but you know, who can really prove that? But whatever, it doesn't matter. Movie, basically, it's about a burning, a groundskeeper or caretaker in a camp Blackfoot. He's horribly burned, and the reason behind that is because there is a prank that's pulled on him, a pretty nasty prank that goes about as wrong as any prank can go. A bunch of kids, they don't like him. We learn a little later that he's kind of an asshole drunk, so that's probably why they decided to do that. But they put this like flaming skull, like this skull with like just candles in it, like right by his bed. And you know, as most caretakers do in cartoons, he sleeps next to a bed of gasoline. So he wakes up, he sees the skull full of the flaming eyes, and he's like, oh! Then he knocks it over in a very comical way, and then the gas falls over, then flames all over the place. He runs out of the place screaming. He's on fire, and the kids are like, oh, "Shit, let's get out of here." And that's pretty much it. That's how the origin of the Cropsey killer is how he's referred to. How that begins, and in kind of an unprecedented kind of move in one of these types of movies. There's like an interlude of 5 years later after his burning. So it's not enough for a movie like this to have that horrible accident and then cut to all that time later, and then get to the campers and stuff like that. Here it actually kind of shows a little bit of his sort of recuperation, the attempts by the doctors to bring him into some sense of normalcy, trying skin grafts, things like that, and he's in the hospital for 5 years, and we get kind of the patented scene of the new doctor in the hospital kind of being teased a little bit by the orderly who's seen it all, who a lot of people mistake for Lawrence Fishburne, but I think they're thinking about Nightmare on Elm Street 5, or Nightmare on Elm Street 3. This is not Lawrence Fishburne, but he's like, "Will you get a load of this? This is going to make you shit your pants." Then he like kind of opens the curtains in the hospital, and he's like, "Take a look at," then the hand grabs him, and it's very scary. Anyway, Cropsey, or whatever the fuck his real name is, he gets released, released into society where, his rehabilitation isn't really complete. One thing is his burns, right? I mean, they try their best, but you hear like the doctor in like the kind of a voiceover, like, "We tried our best, just do what you can." Like, great. I know you must be real sour at those boys, but, don't cause any shit. That's pretty much the extent of it. So I don't think he went into any psychological rehabilitation, which may have been useful, but that's applying too many aspects of real life logic into a cheesy horror movie. But at the same time, it's like you look at something like Friday the 13th. Oh, Jason drowned. Now he's back as like a crazy killer. That's all you need to know. Jason, didn't go to counseling sessions. Anyway, we first see Cropsey in his kind of full-on form, how we kind of know him as, this dark figure in the cloak and the hat. We see him all those years later out in normal society. His, I guess, first reaction is to pick up a prostitute. And this is set in New York, so it's a very New York-y prostitute, if that makes any sense. Like, the most stereotypically New York prostitute that you could think of is in this movie. And that's another weird. Again, I'm putting too much like real life logic into the movie, but it's like she's got to be the most oblivious prostitute in the history of prostitutes in these types of movies, where I'm positive he didn't say anything. She probably just assumed he was a John or something. It's like, oh, come up to my place, baby, and like, oh, you're not saying anything, but you being all silent and dressed in black, I mean, seems legit. Like, I don't know how the beginning portion of that scene must have played out, but whatever. Anyway, he kills her. I mean, that's it. So then it cuts to the camp. It's I don't know if it's the same camp or a nearby camp that's now Camp Stonewater, where we see the new group of kids, and this is just spot on 80s camp horror movie to the T. Has all the the kind of stereotypes that you'd think of. Has the girls in their short shorts and tight shirts without bras. Like there's a very exploitive baseball scene where we see one girl like running in slow motion. Like, I mean, come on, that's what these movies are. And of course, the boys of the camp. We have the sort of nerds, we have the jocks, we have kind of the misunderstood loser, we have the bully, and all the rest. I don't know, like typical kind of camp characters. And of course, one of them, very well known for being Jason Alexander, plays kind of the goofy, nerdy dude. So it's kind of interesting to see him in such a very early role, like a very younger role. Where he has hair, and I don't know, but it's just interesting to me. But there's some good characters, and I think that's kind of, at least in part, of why this movie is like the way it is, because it does have decent enough characters where you got to figure this isn't like full-on bloodbath massacre. We have that beginning murder with the hooker to kind of tide us over, but really for the duration of maybe half an hour, which is an eternity in a horror movie, which are usually like 90 minutes or so. We just get to know the characters a little bit, so we get to know their kind of traits and things like that, and for the most part, they're entertaining and likable characters. And there is the one lead counselor whose name is Todd. He's revealed later. I guess this is a spoiler. This is going to be a spoiler-filled review. So if you don't want any spoilers, stop watching right now. It turns out that this guy was one of the kids who played that prank on Cropsey. So he kind of has this determination to be, I'm going to make sure everything in this camp runs smoothly. I'm going to make sure no kids are being picked on. I'm going to make sure no one feels out of place or no one feels, lonely or whatever. You can always talk to me. I'm, the big brother type of counselor. And, that goes to show in one scene where the one kid who's kind of weird and doesn't really want to be there and kind of peeps on the girls in this really creepy way. He talks to him. He's like, come on, man. You can always talk to me about things, blah, 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 blah. So he's good. And there's just a lot of bleed-ins, and there's a lot of stalking scenes where we see the point of view of Cropsey, where, at least according to the trivia, they smeared Vaseline all over the lens of the camera to give it this distorted look, which I think actually works kind of nicely. So we see the girl kind of chasing after the baseball after the baseball game. Got hit out into the woods, and we see him. His weapon is quite interesting. You can see here is the garden shears. So we see him with the shears about to get her, but then she finds the ball and leaves, and it's like, ooh, scary. And one character kind of sees him in the window and things like that. So I think it appropriately kind of builds tension like that. The first real murder, at least from other than the hooker, of course, that occurs is, I believe it's when the boy and girl they're going skinny dipping. So the one guy, he's like this kind of New Yorker kind of wop kind of I don't even know. Vinnie Barbarino kind of type, minus the leather jacket. It's summer, you got to figure they don't always wear the jacket. But he's like the ladies' man, and he's like trying to convince the girl to, come out with him and skinny dip. And she does to a point. Then he gets a little too rapey, and, she gets away from there, basically. And he's really aggressive. It's a very scary type of character, more than the killer. It's how aggressively rapey this guy can be. But, Cropsey kills her. So people think that he did something, and then there's all this stuff. So there's a lot of confusion going on. The canoes go missing, everything like that. And, it all kind of leads up to the most gore gorifically ecstasy scene, in one of these movies where the group of the counselors they build this raft to try and see if they can find the canoes, and they see one there, and they're going up to it, and all of a sudden, Cropsey comes up with his shears, and he fucking massacres the fucking shit out of them. And there's some like nasty shit, like he stabs the one guy right in the neck, and like slashes the one girl across the forehead, chops the one guy's fingers off, and like it just like kind of like shows that one shot of like the girl's hand, and like the blood is dripping and stuff. It's pretty gruesome. Like that's kind of one of the good things about these types of movies. Like they're really shocking, and they're bloody and horrifying and things like that. But you notice how quick these types of scenes go. So it's not like something like Saw, where it's just like showing off this elaborate special effect of like guts being ripped out and all that stuff. It's really quick. It's really shocking, and it stays in your head a lot more than these like overly elaborate kind of gory effects do. At least I kind of think so. Of course, this is kind of around the same time, well, a little bit before those special effects could become so elaborate, like with something like Hellraiser kind of led the way in that. But here it's just really convincing effects, really startling kind of gore, and I think it works terrifically. So I think that's the key moment of this movie, the most memorable moment. Such a great scene. After that part, I do think the movie kind of drags a little bit. Like the thing is, like there's an ending scene where Cropsey is pursuing the remaining campers, and Todd kind of finally confronts him. Cropsey is the flamethrower, and then there's the other kid who's kind of caught in the middle too, who he was talking to. I forget the kid's name, but the creepy, pervert kid. There's this whole showdown at the end, and it just kind of drags on a little bit, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, because they do in these movies anyway. Look at any Friday the 13th. Think about how long those chase scenes are. Same principle with this, so I think we can cut it a little bit of a break, because what came before was so good, so solid. And it is a little bit different. I mean, this, at least in part, kind of paved the way, aside from the Friday the 13th movies. But it is something a little bit different to see, like the final protagonist, the final survivor, basically, be a man, and him actually have some connection to the killer being who's pursuing him. So I think that's something a little bit different. So it kind of adds a little bit of weight to the overall story, I think. I'd say it's fair enough to say that. So it all leads to the big final showdown, and Cropsey gets an axe in the head, and it's all pretty good. Good effects. One thing I should mention, though, it almost goes without saying, Tom Savini did the effects for this movie, and it shows. It's really high quality gore effects, and pretty good disfigurement effects on Cropsey. Though, again, I've read in the trivia that he's a little bit unsatisfied with it. He said he wished he had more time to do it, but I think it looks fine. You look at something like Jason, I think maybe, whatever he didn't accomplish in The Burning, I think he made up for in Friday the 13th Part 4, if that makes any sense. So I think he had his redemption, basically. But I think Cropsey looks fine, pretty creepy. And the gore is, of course, excellent, as we can expect from Tom Savini. And it's just a good type of campfire tale kind of movie. I mean, that's what it stems from. This is an Cropsey, as far as I've read, is an actual campfire tale that's told in New York, New Jersey area. So it takes its inspiration from that, and it's simple, it's scary, it's good, and it deserves its classic status. Definitely you can make some nitpicks about it. There's some pacing issues, particularly near the end, but what horror movie doesn't? A lot of people seem to bring up the time of day in the movie. It's always inconsistent. Like, you see one shot it's day, one shot it's night, and you're like, what the fuck is going on? Fair enough, but not a huge budget movie, so all those criticisms are fairly tiny when it comes to the overall quality of the movie, which I gotta say, this is a fantastic slasher. Gets the job done in just about every respect you could hope for. So it's too bad it did get kind of lost in the shuffle. We didn't get any kind of sequels. We never saw Cropsey Returns, though. Who knows? Maybe one day this will be remade. I know. Who likes remakes? But if they could kind of revive it and make a franchise out of it, that'd be kind of interesting. This is a Miramax movie, right? So I mean, it has some studio pull behind it, so maybe they're keeping it locked up for a reason. But as far as I know, one, this DVD release kind of really helped the legend kind of build up a little bit more. And two, we have I think just recently the Scream Factory release came out, so I'm so behind on my Scream Factory shit. So I got to check that out. But The Burning. If you love Friday the 13th movies, this is as good as, if let's say you particularly love the first four, this is something that fits really nicely in that kind of mood and that kind of atmosphere. So it's very much like one of those. So if you love those, you're going to love the Burning. So it's definitely a classic. It's definitely being found for a new generation for a reason. So if you haven't seen it, I can't recommend it highly enough. So that's my review. Thanks very much for watching. Be sure to comment, rate, subscribe, all that good stuff. I'm going to put some links for my previous 31 Days of Horror playlists below, so check those out too. And keep on watching this year, 2015, 31 Days of Horror going strong. More horror reviews every day, so keep an eye out for that. Watch out for Cropsey, and until next time, I'll see you later.